Welcome, everybody. It's so pleasure to see everybody. I'm so pleased to see you. I would like to thank our sponsors for their support, our longtime sponsor, NBT Bank, M&T Bank, and our new Schenectady resident, Saratoga National Bank. Thank you. Also, thanks to all of you, because you every year support this annual lunch and you always come in and participate. Thank you so much. All of you for your continued support, dedication, and fair housing and promoting equal opportunities. We're fortunate this year to have Assistant Secretary of Fair Housing, Ana Maria Farias, and the HUD Regional Director of Fair Housing, Jay Golden, Acting Field Office Director, Jim Berlinski, and Andy Prizlek, Director of Fair Housing from Buffalo office, who I'm always thankful to, and thank you. We're grateful to our great Congressman Paul Tonko, Mayor McCarthy, and the City Council for their continued support in promoting fair housing, equal opportunities in Schenectady and our region. Schenectady is continuously offering equal housing opportunities to all. The city is working hard to make the American dream of homeownership possible for many. You may notice the capital region, New York State, is experiencing sharp and large growth. Major economic investment is a visible sign of that. As we grow, we attract many diverse groups to the area in high-tech industry and all the industries, in the smart initiatives, in other products. We're grateful to HUD for helping us tremendously with fair housing enforcement. Any case we refer to our regional office has been followed and handled appropriately. In order to affirmatively further fair housing, we need to expand our fair housing outreach programs in our area. We do lack sufficient outreach, and we would like to see more outreach capability and further resources in order to be proactive and to outreach those that are not well-versed and do not have knowledge of the Fair Housing Act and their rights. As you can see, we have great organizations in here. Around here, they are willing to participate in outreach programs. We would like to ask HUD and other responsible agencies to help us affirmatively further fair housing and give us better ability to reach majority of those involved in the housing and housing-related issues. Today, we will hear very helpful information from the great and wonderful speakers regarding fair housing. We have great program for you in the next 2 hours. Would like to thank Jeff McDonald, the owner of the Stockade Inn, and Christine for helping us, accommodating us. And also at the end, I would like to ask my colleague Derek and Dan Gray for helping putting this event together. Thank you very much. I would like to ask our great mayor, Mr. Gary McCarthy, because every year he does proclaim April as a National Fair Housing Month, he has a proclamation for us and also welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmad. I want to welcome everyone here today, acknowledge some of my colleagues from City Hall, City Council President Ed Kosher, Council members John Palomini, Marion Porterfield, Lisa Perazzo. While we do the ceremonial proclamation every year, which is appropriate, but fair housing is something that only happens if we work at it every day. It requires a collective engagement where it's bankers, it's realtors, it's housing professionals that make a difference, that create opportunity and make sure that there is not discrimination that occurs in our community or other communities across the country. But on behalf of the city and the office of the mayor, we issued a proclamation, whereas the Congress of the United States passed the Civil Rights Act of 1968, of which Title VIII declared that the laws of the land would now guarantee the rights of equal housing opportunity. And whereas the laws of this nation and our state seek to ensure such equality of choice for all transactions involving housing. And whereas the city of Schenectady is committed to the mission and intent of Congress to provide fair and equal housing opportunities for all, regardless of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, or familial status. And whereas ongoing education, outreach, and monitoring are key to raising the awareness of fair housing principles, practices, rights, and responsibilities. And whereas only through continued cooperation, commitment, and support can barriers to fair housing be removed. Now, therefore, I, Gary McCarthy, Mayor of the City of Schenectady, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2018 as Fair Housing Month in the City of Schenectady, and express the hope that this year's observance will further promote fair housing practices throughout the City of Schenectady. Again, Ahmad, I'll present that to you. Just want to acknowledge some other individuals who are joining us today. Ahmad went through our very distinguished guests from HUD. And Madam Secretary, I thank you for working Schenectady into your schedule, because it is an honor to have you here. And again, the work that we do every day, not only from your staff, but the city and the real estate professionals and housing professionals that are in this room, that make a difference in so many people's lives. But I want to recognize Joe Culver, Senior VP from NBT Bank, a longtime partner, Eric Dahl from M&T Bank, Richard Ferguson from Glens Falls National Bank. There's Jack Falvo, a man of many hats now. Chief here? Oh, there he is. Ray Senecal, our fire chief, Richard Ferguson, Anthony Ferrari, the Commissioner of Finance. We've paid the bill today, haven't we, Anthony, so we can enjoy our lunch? Okay, that's good. Thomas Houlihan from the Troy Housing Authority. Susan Summer, the President of the Greater Capital Association of Realtors. Susan, thank you again for being here today and just the ongoing efforts and support that you and your organization have provided us. And with that, I will turn it back to Ahmad and thank everyone, and want you to enjoy your lunch.
As always, thank you for your support, Mr. Mayor. I have the privilege and honor to announce Congressman Paul Tonko, who has been great to us from many, many years, for 18 years that I know, and would like to come up, and he has a proclamation, and also would like to say a few words. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, Ahmad, and good afternoon, everyone. On a great day of celebration, to all of my colleagues in government, to the mayor and the many elected officials and appointed officials that make government work and work very well in our region. Thank you for your work, especially as it relates to housing. Thank you to the housing team, to Jay Golden and others in New York, as a regional director who connect the federal programs to the state and its many communities, and to our Assistant Secretary, Ana Maria Farias. Thank you for joining us. It's an honor to host you here. This is a wonderful time. Cora Schroeder, our person who manages our Schenectady office, and I are honored by the invitation, and we're happy to join you. You know, I think back of the slogan on top of, or the statement on top of the banner, a year to remember, 1968. Over the last couple of years, I've been part of many, many celebrations that honor the golden anniversary of great steps forward in this country. You know, I think our framers of our Constitution had it right. We, the people in search of a more perfect union, told us that from the get-go, with our humble roots, we understood that as we gathered together, there would always be room for progress, for achieving a higher ground. I think those aspirational politics of the 60s drew like a magnet many of us to this arena, because we are going to make life better. I see Sharon Johnson nodding, because many, many conversations in her Amsterdam days and Schenectady days as a housing authority person to get advice as to how we could improve the housing situation for people across this country. And in 1968, a statement was made by this country and her leaders that there was discrimination, there was unfairness, and that we needed a better outcome for far too many people. And so today we celebrate what was a landmark bit of legislation that pushed discrimination aside and that we were going to be a better world because of it. And so it's what we honor today in the proclamation that I bring, acknowledging that on April 11th, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed that legislation into law that again spoke to another crown jewel of progress for this nation. And one would think we would only go forward from there. But we know that there's unfinished business. I don't like the tone at times that I hear coming out of Washington or across the country. We know that there's unfinished business and we can do better than this. So let this serve as inspiration. Let it remind us that when we want, we can come together as a nation and resolve to make life better for all of our people. And so to all in this room who have partnered in any way to make fair housing possible for the people that we all call neighbors, thank you. From the realtors to the elected officials to the appointed officials, to those in the banking industry, all who make this golden opportunity of housing available for people, thank you. And let's only go upward from here, no going backward. We need to make certain that our policies enrich the opportunities for fair housing. And I'll continue to work however I can within my intellect and energy in Washington to make certain we only go upward and forward. So to the spirit of the legislation, this is a golden opportunity, a 50th anniversary opportunity to say yes to progress, to aspirational politics that bring us to a higher ground. Thank you so much, and enjoy the luncheon.
As always, thank you, Congressman. And we're proud and happy to have you representing us. Now we're going to ask Mr. Golden, who was here 11 years ago, and Sharon, you probably remember that you were sitting at this table with them. And thank you for your support, Mr. Golden. And anytime we had a question, and we referred to his office, and our questions were all answered and appropriately taken care of. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Congressman Tonko. Thank you, Mayor McCarthy, for the Fair Housing Proclamation on the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Fair Housing Act. Ahmed, again, thank you for doing a superlative job of both ensuring enforcement of the city's fair housing laws day in and day out, and also a superlative job in coordinating these commemorative luncheons each year. I'd also like to recognize Ron Gardner, your affirmative action manager, who creates economic opportunities for business here in Schenectady and also creates training and employment opportunities for your local residents. His work is vital to the economic health of the city. As Ahmed mentioned, I last joined with you 11 years ago at the 2007 Fair Housing Luncheon. I was your guest speaker at that time. I provided a keynote address on behalf of our then Assistant Secretary, Kim Kendrick, who was not able to be with us. So not only am I pleased to be with you again, but I'm even more pleased that our present Assistant Secretary could take the time out of her very busy schedule to speak with you and meet with you today. I think you'll all agree with me that the Federal Fair Housing Act was one of the most important pieces of legislation passed in the 20th century. It extended constitutional protections for our citizens by addressing discrimination in housing, and also by securing fairness and equal opportunity for all Americans with respect to the places that they choose to live. So we gather each April in appreciation of passage of that act, and we also do so because we recall that these constitutional protections did not come easily. As you know, it took the martyrdom of Dr. King on April 4th in 1968 to help move this law to fruition. And it was only 7 days later, on April 11th, 1968, that the Fair Housing Act became the law. So each year, while we celebrate passage of the act, we also remain mindful of the efforts of Dr. King and of so many others who stood up to fight for fairness. And we mark this anniversary today by pledging to continue this work, to continue to enforce this legislation. As you see, our theme for this Fair Housing Month is 50 years of opening doors, which is a very true statement of fact. And in this 50th year, we are particularly focusing on 3 jurisdictions under the Act that are often ignored or misunderstood, and I just wanted to mention them briefly. First, the Act protects the rights of women with respect to housing, the right to feel safe in your own home, the right to feel free of sexual harassment. Second, the Act protects the rights of families. No family should have to endure the humiliation of being told, I'm sorry, we can't rent to you, or you can't purchase this home because you have children, or because you're expecting a child. And third, the Act protects the rights of the disabled. New buildings need to be designed and constructed to permit access for the disabled. And we must also ensure that persons who require service or assistance animals can obtain that assistance openly. Now, I'm proud to tell you that in this region and in our nation, we've been moving forward in ensuring fair housing. At the start of this fiscal year, for example, over 70% of our open cases in this region were open for over a year. But justice should not be deferred for that long. So we instituted a process to speed up our investigations, and I'm proud to tell you that as of today in this region, all of the cases that were over a year old have now been resolved, almost half of which involved obtaining settlements. Also, while our region represents about 1/10 of the nation, we have issued 1/3 of the nation's charges of discrimination this year so far, and more are on the way. Over the past 6 months alone, we've settled about 100 cases. We've provided relief for about 600 people. We've obtained monetary settlements and modifications valued in excess of $8 million. We've also been collaborating closely with the Justice Department in investigating sexual harassment complaints in the region. And during the past few months, I was also involved in a special project. We are redesigning our National Fair Housing website to make it easier for everyone to access it, to understand it. With respect to the city of Schenectady, there are 4 complaints currently under investigation. All were filed on the basis of race. 2 allege discriminatory terms and conditions. 1 alleges a refusal to rent. The 4th alleges a refusal to sell. We're currently working to ensure these cases are resolved without delay. 50 years ago, in April, Dr. King delivered his final speech, which has come to be known as the mountaintop speech. There's a short quote from that speech that I'd like to read to you. He said, and I quote, "We need all of you. We don't have to argue with anybody. We don't have to curse. We don't have to go around acting bad. Let us rise up with a greater readiness. Let us stand with a greater determination. And let us move on in these days of challenge to make America what it ought to be. We have an opportunity to make America a greater nation. And I want to thank God for allowing me to be here with you. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream." Well, we continue to face challenging times today in our work, and in response, we remain focused and continue to do the best that we can. Now, one of the main reasons that our office is remaining focused and is ensuring justice for all is our Assistant Secretary. I'm certain you've all read her biography. Having grown up in a housing project, she's well aware of the effects of discrimination, and she's quite familiar with fair housing, having previously served with HUD for many years, having worked closely with our office in our region for so long. So when I heard that she was exiting retirement to rejoin us, I was delighted, and I'm certain that you will also be delighted and inspired by her wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Assistant Secretary Ana Maria Farias.
Thank you for coming. I do realize that I'm standing between the podium and lunch, so I better make this very serious and very interesting so that I don't have to hear your stomach and my stomach growling. I'm very happy to be here. I've spent the last month traveling through 14 states, 16 speeches, and about 45 meetings. The reason why I do this is not only because this is the 50th anniversary, but because as I see you, and I want to thank the mayor, congressman, and all our staff, city council, county commissioners, housing commissioners, superintendents, you are what make things either happen or not happen. And don't worry, I'm not going to read a speech. I have a speech writer. I'm like, I never read a speech. I speak from the heart and from what I know so that you can understand how serious I am. I did retire. I was very happy to retire at the age of 57 since I had already been working on my resume since I was 12. And I said, it's time to go and enjoy life. And there is life after retirement. And then I got a call from my former college professor and mentor, William J. Bennett. He says, Kid. And I'm glad to be called Kid because I joined the Medicare Brigade last year. So you can call me Kid anytime. He says, you want a job? I said, I'm retired. He says, I didn't ask you that. Do you want a job? And I'm like, so they started talking about places, and I'm like, and they mentioned FHEO. And I said, you know, I'm retired. I'm the chairman of the Board of Regents of the Texas Women's University. And the other regents that are along my side are either millionaires or billionaires. And I'm the one that donated $300. And when I call, people jump. And I know for a fact that FHEO, it is in fact one of the most difficult programs and at times one of the most controversial. To which Bill Bennett said, so you came and worked for me when we had to deal with bilingual education, so you know what to do. Now, why did I go back? I do not need to tell you everything that has been told here by the other speakers. I'm going to tell you how serious I am about fair housing because I came into being long before fair housing. I was born in San Antonio, Texas, but I was raised in Piedras Negras, Coahuila, Mexico. So I went to school in Mexico 3 years. My mom, single mom, she was a living maid in Crystal City, Texas, 38 miles from the Mexican border. And in Mexico, we lived in what's called the colonias, which is third world conditions. You had outhouses, and you had newspapers for toilet paper, and I'd never seen grass. And if you wanted to go and play, you went out in the street, which is what I did. My grandma, like so many other grandparents in other countries, she'd go and they'd get her little rocking chair, she'd sit by a sidewalk while I was playing baseball. You know, Latin Americans, we love to play baseball. So you played out in the street. And my grandmother told my mom, who worked 6.5 days per week, making between $12 and $20 per week, you can have the child back, she used to go and visit me on the weekends, when you find a decent place for the two of you to go and live. So it was in 1961 that my mom was able to get us a home in the Crystal City housing projects. Nowadays they call them housing developments. And I've always associated red brick with strength, perseverance, and success. Because the original housing developments in the late 40s and early 50s were specifically built for the families, the mothers, the wives, the children of the fallen military, because the government felt we owe it to them to take care of them. And when they first started, mayors would donate some of the best lands in some of the best areas, and the homes were made of red brick. Later on, as they developed more housing developments, it started getting in the worst parts of towns, and later on close to what was called brownfields. In other words, if you're from the South, the termites would take over a lot of that. Now, before I continue, I do want to give you credit to the city of Schenectady, because I'm told by the mayor that you, in fact, started building the very first public housing. New York State takes credit because they finished the first, but you started the first, so you get that credit. And we Texans, by the way, we love LBJ because he's a Texan. And it was LBJ who used to go in order to get his votes to pass the Civil Rights Act the first time, and then the Voting Act, and then finally the Fair Housing Act. He loved to tell the story about when he was a young teacher in Cotulla, Texas, which is only 18 miles from where I grew up in Crystal City, Texas, that he taught a group of little Mexican kids in one classroom made of wood and dirt floors because no one wanted to teach them, and most people thought that they should not be taught. And when I went to school in '61, I didn't speak the language. So I first went to something that looked like half a box, and they actually looked like offices. It was not a school. And later on, I found out, because there's a book written called The Train That Went Through Crystal City, Texas, that those were actually offices of the military, and some of you used to work in intelligence, so you know what I'm about to say. And that's where it was an internment camp for Japanese and Germans who were going to be swapped for prisoners of war, unbeknownst to the rest of the country. But these were American citizens. They just happened to be Japanese and German. And so, but I didn't last very long in that because they gave me a test and I scored a perfect 100 in math because I knew math and there were numbers, but I scored a perfect 0 in the rest because I didn't speak the language. So before long, I had 3 teachers and an interpreter who came behind me and says, take this test again. So to this day, I can only do math in Spanish, I guess because of its alliteration. I cannot do it in English. And I can still do it without using a little machine. So I'm go there, 8 por 2, 16, 7 por 3, 21. So I got it, perfect score again. So it's like, well, what are we gonna do with her? Story of my life. What are we gonna do with her? So I got in trouble because I used to get bored and I would go around doing people's math problems. But I didn't do it out of the goodness of my heart. I charged them a nickel. And I really got in trouble. So after Christmas, they told my mother, she's not coming to the school anymore. She's going to go to the migrant school. And I'm like, why am I in the migrant school? I'm not a migrant. He says, because you're coming here after the beginning of the school year, and you do not speak the language. So my question was always, I will learn the language, but who's going to teach me? I will learn it. So I went and complained to my mom, who then went and got an extra job so that she could pay someone to sit next to me teaching me English. And I said, I will learn it as quickly as possible because I wanted to go to the Zavala Elementary School that was made of red brick. But every day during the school year, at 12:10, a bus would come and pick us up so they could take us to that Zavala Elementary so we could go to the lunchroom because they had the cafeteria. We got there at 12:15. By that time, the other kids had already been served, and then we would be served whatever was left over. And if there wasn't enough left over, we would just get things in a box that were cold. And we had to go and sit on the other side because we didn't belong to the nice elementary school. And even though it was aggravating and at times humiliating, it was worth it because for me, every single day, I had that brief opportunity to get a glimpse of what I wanted for my future, which was that little Zavala Elementary made of red brick. So I learned the language. 3rd grade, I was able to go to the nice school, be part of the softball team because I was a darn good ball player, so everybody wanted me in their team. I could catch, I could pitch, I could definite steal bases, and I could run. This little Speedy Gonzalez could move very fast. And I learned from then the old saying that goes, you can't make it to second base unless you get your feet off first base. And oftentimes that has been part of my life. I've taken a lot of risks. And 98% of the time, it worked. I got to second base. But a lot of things, so I won, and I could compete subject matters, and I had the opportunity to win, so I got to win a lot. But a lot of things started happening in the third grade. That's when our third grade teacher, Mrs. Johnson, came in crying and told us that we needed to go home because in Dallas, President Kennedy had been assassinated. And we Texans had to live with that shame for many decades. Later on, we had to find out that the Reverend Martin Luther King had been assassinated. 63 days later, Robert Kennedy was assassinated. In between that time, they tried to assassinate Governor George Wallace, who himself stood in front of the school so that two African-American students, a male and a female, would not go inside that classroom. Like when LBJ used to say, there were people that didn't think a bunch of little Mexican kids needed to be educated. The governor felt the same way, or if they were going to be educated, they needed to go somewhere else. So my generation grew up with enormous strife, enormous guilt, enormous danger. And we were right in the midst of the Vietnam War. So I did make it out of the housing projects. Usually it was good, sometimes it wasn't. I'll never forget when I was 11, a maintenance director came to our home, and I was in the hall so I could hear the conversation. And he came in because he wanted to put the moves on my mom. And my mom said no. And he said, well, if not you, how about your daughter? And then the next thing I heard was, as my mom just smacked the heck out of him. And she said, as I told you, I love baseball, so I always had a couple of extra baseball bats in the house. She told him, if you ever come back, I will have a baseball bat, and I will break both your legs and your skull. So I knew right away that my mom knew how to defend herself and protect me. But also growing up, I also knew that there were a lot of moms that didn't think they had those choices or even the choice of protecting their children. And so our 50th anniversary talks about opening doors. And it is not enough. Civil rights said, do not discriminate in housing. But it didn't give it any teeth. The fair housing was the one that gave it the enforcement powers. And when we say opening doors, it also does not mean that a woman, and at times a man, because we just had a case dealing with a man, has to sell their soul just so that they don't have to feel that they're going to be evicted because someone closed the door just because they said no. And this Monday, we issued 3 charges and 3 settlements dealing strictly with sexual harassment. So I did graduate, and I went to the East Coast. I did, in fact, learn English, and I was, in fact, the junior high and high school valedictorian. So that was, in 1972, that was my ticket out of the housing developments. And I wanted to go to Harvard, but they said, oh, yeah, you were the valedictorian, but it was from a small town, so it doesn't mean anything. So I ended up getting a full scholarship to Boston University, and I thought, I crossed the Rio Grande, and in a year I want to be able to cross the Charles River into Cambridge. Those are the rivers I want to cross. And I was very blessed to get a professor like William J. Bennett, who became my mentor, and then the rest for me in education was history. And I learned a long time ago to never say never, because one of the things that I always said was I would never go back to a little town. And then life happens. I get a phone call from my mom, and she was crying. And the women in my family, we rarely cry. So it has to be something. I thought somebody must be dying if my mom's crying. It wasn't. She was calling because she said, this was the early 90s. She says, the thugs and the drug dealers have taken over. It was the beginning of the drug trade and the cartel. And I said, no problem. I need to move you to San Antonio, Texas. that has the relatives, has the hospitals, it has everything that you need. Of course, I was thinking about my comfort level, not hers. Well, as I'm showing her around, she starts crying again, and I'm like, she says, but why do I have to move? I'm not the criminal. And right then and there, I realized that I was going to have to do something that I did not want to do, which was go back home. I had already worked for 2 presidents and 3 cabinet secretaries. I lived in Alexandria, Virginia, one of the most affluent and safest in the world. And I thought my mom gave up her youth to take care of me, to give me all the opportunities. And now I have this great Eastern education, all these awards, and to what end? I had to conclude that was then time for me to go back home and fix things, because it takes one to know how to fix it, and if you've lived there before, you do it. However, I was still very arrogant. I told them, I'll give you 6 months of my time and I can fix it. I was there 7 years. I went home, and I became the first executive director in the country that also agreed to live in the housing projects while I was the executive director. And they placed me in what was called Project Terror. It was the site of murders, rapes, child prostitution, and child pornography. And I started cleaning it up, and I soon had a contract on my life. But I knew people. I knew a lot of the federal agents. And above all, I knew the elderly that had seen me growing up. And I quickly learned that when one of their grandchildren came to me and said, Miss Farias, my grandma said for you to leave right now, or for you not to go to this place. And by then I had bought my first car, which was a 1995 Mustang. And that car could get out of there within, from 3 seconds, could go from 0 to 80 miles just stepping on it. And it was very dangerous when you get in the way of some very bad people. And the more I saw it, the more convinced I was that I had to stay there and, in fact, help fix it. Because I had been fortunate enough, through hard work and the right guidance, to be able to get out of the housing developments. And other kids deserve the same opportunity. But they were being brought down, and to see really good kids and really good teenagers become junkies or die of an overdose. And I think now people can understand, because you're seeing all about the opioids. Some of us, we saw that in the early 90s. And we saw a lot of our generation just dying. A slow death, but dying. And I survived also because I'm a Texan. And I had a couple of friends. Besides the fact that every day I would talk to the Lord upstairs and to my grandma, who had already passed, talk to the Lord again. There's nothing more fearful when you're doing that than when you turn the key on your car and you don't know if it's going to go boom. Or you have to check your trunk to make sure nothing's there, because that's how they set up people. But once again, it's the kids that kept an eye on that. But I also had some friends. Under the seat of my car, I always kept a loaded .357 Magnum. And my attitude was, I may not be able to shoot. I had a license to carry. I still do. I had a license to carry. Figure maybe I can get them, but those things make such loud noise that they think it would be a cannon. And then under my pillow, I always had a loaded 9mm. And I had bats, and it didn't end there. I got myself fired and evicted, just like the way I used to evict the drug dealers. When I was evicting the mayor's friends, or would not hire the sons of some of the councilmen, they got very angry with me. But I knew they were criminals, so I was not going to hire them. And I got evicted in a very public way, the same way I used to evict the bad guys. And as I was moving my things from the house to the car, the drug dealers were clapping. This happened in March. In May, there were city council elections. And the mayor and 2 of the city council were thrown out of office. A new mayor came in, new commissioners came in, and they brought me back. And they sent me back to live in the housing developments. So I always said the first time was out of necessity, Second time was choice. The third time was just sheer stubbornness because I needed to finish what I had started. And I did. And once I left, a person stayed there as executive director for almost 14 or 16 years, but he was the perfect person to do it. We had taken care of things, we had settled things, and he was both a district clerk of a district judge, and he had been doing that for 22 years, and he also happened to be a Catholic deacon. So the old saying was, I know their crimes, I know their sins, they're all going to behave, and they did in fact behave. The reason why I came back is that I will never forget what the government did for my mother and myself in giving us refuge when we needed it. And oftentimes it's kids like myself that need to go back home, even though we may not want to go home, because we know what it is to desperately want that opportunity so that later we can make our own choices where we want to go and live. And that is extremely important. One of the things that I found out right away, and Jay and I met 1 month after 9/11, which is very painful. And I remember being the representative a year later for those commemorations and going to the special room where they brought in for the first time many of the parents that had never been able to bury their own because their bodies were disintegrated. And in all my travels this past month to Oklahoma, where it was our own homegrown terrorist, and the reason that I go and travel as much as I can, I always tell the front office, headquarters, this is not where things happened. They happen out in the field. And I'm of the belief, especially now that I'm retired, that I can always go back to my retirement. By the way, HUD got me at a senior citizen discount. I call it the blue light special. I came, they said, this is how much you're gonna make, deduct your annuity, deduct your social security, deduct, and you have to divest yourself as chairman of the Board of Regents. I'm like, all right. One of the things that I tell the front office time and time again was there's the old joke that it takes 15 federal employees to change a light bulb. I go, and what I don't want is I don't want to know that any case or potential charge is going to go through 15 reviews. It is not acceptable to me. It is not acceptable to the secretary. And if I stopped a couple of investigations for a little time, it was only because we have 1 or 2 cases that have been outstanding for a couple of decades. And they're still out there and they have not been resolved. And so when we go after certain construction and design, their immediate response is, why are you coming after us, HUD, when you cannot deal with this city that has been in violation for decades on? So that's what we're taking care of. And they already know my patience has run out. And when I send the general counsel, it's like, we take care of this now, or we're gonna take care of it a different way. But it will be taken care of, and then the other ones follow. So sometimes I don't want anyone to think that I'm stopping any investigations. It's just very temporary because we're coming after the huge ones. And just like Monday, we issued 3 charges and 3 settlements on sexual harassment. One of the big things, and I'm gonna end it here. One of the big first cases that I got, it was a sexual harassment where an 8 and a 9-year-old had to testify about how a maintenance director came in the middle of the night being like 2 in the morning. Who's fixing something at 2 in the morning? And mommy was fighting him off and saying no. And when I read that, I read it about 3 more times. And then I remembered that 11-year-old when my mom was saying no. And I remember at 11 years old thinking to myself, one of these days, if I make it out of the housing projects and I make something of myself, I will take care of it. That day is now. And we have partnered with the Department of Justice and the U.S. attorneys to deal with sexual harassment. And that is now not just something that gets someone fired. That's called a criminal act. otherwise known as a felony. And especially some of the cases we're seeing right now, there is abuse of the elderly because people want to experiment with the elderly. That's not going to happen under our watch. And Jay knows that, and as I've traveled all around the country, I tell our grantees who are known as the FIBs and FABs, you get us those cases quickly. This Monday, there were 3 charges, 2 on women and 1 on a man, because he's mentally challenged. So once again, they're going after the ones that are the most victimized, because they're the ones that need the most help. I will devote all my time to fair housing, because I know that it's needed. I know that it works, because I'm a product of fair housing. And I have always said it, and I will say it over and over again. My mom and I will always thank the government for putting us up in a public development housing projects, as they call them, when we needed that refuge. And it is my way of paying back. But Congressman, I want to assure you, I will never forget LBJ, because he passed that Civil Rights Act saying, I had to go and teach a classroom full of little Mexicans, and I'm a little Mexican by descent, born in the United States, because nobody wanted to teach them. And some people thought they should not be taught. And luckily for me, I had a strong mom, and then I got a heck of a great mentor by the name of William J. Bennett, who kept saying, kid, you can do it, kid, you're gonna graduate from law school. And I will work as hard as I know that I can work to make sure, sir, that fair housing, as it's due, and it does become the enforcement fair housing. Thank you.
So we're going to continue with our program, and we're going to start. Greatly appreciated, Superintendent of the City School District, Mr. Larry Spring, who at the last minute says, yeah, I will come in and attend the lunch with you. So we're greatly appreciated, and thank you, sir. Please.
Thank you, Amab. So I'm Larry Spring, and I am the superintendent of schools for the Schenectady City School District. And as many of you know, my mission is to ensure that race, economics, and disability no longer serve as predictors for student achievement. And so for that reason, I am deeply grateful to be here supporting the cause of equitable home ownership for all. Now, a lot of people don't necessarily make that connection. They don't see how those two things fit together. However, we know, I think almost everybody knows, the tough road that urban education has. And in some instances, folks have a deeper understanding of why that is than in other instances. And a lot of people look at the disparities that exist in our society right now, and they say, really what we need is some people to just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And I don't know where, Ahmad, if you want to just show that first slide. To those folks, I want to say, here in this country where we have the highest percentage of our imprisoned populace, with the possible exception of China, and that imprisoned population is predominantly black and brown. We are a developed country with a majority of its children living in poverty, and a majority of those children are black and brown. Too many people just think that people just need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And I think it's important for us to remember when that term was first coined, it was a wry joke to illustrate the inanity, the simple absurdity of being able to pull oneself up out of an impossible situation without any assistance from anyone else. And so semantics and etymology aside, the more important reason to challenge that notion and to celebrate the work that the Housing Authority does has to do with the very reason of that work. And to make sure that a piece of our history is not lost when we think about the root causes of our current reality. And if you want to go to the next slide. It illustrates the practice of what was known as redlining. And redlining is the practice that banks took in outlining neighborhoods that were not desirable and denying loans for housing and development in those areas. And on that screen is a picture of the red line map for Schenectady in 1934. Due to those criteria that were used, the distinctions in those neighborhoods and the population persist to this day. Anyone that knows the city of Schenectady can look at those lines and can see that 1934 or 2018, that those distinctions persist. I find it unrealistic to expect a population of people can just pick themselves up by their bootstraps in the face of such historic and systemic discrimination. If you want to go to the next slide, Ahmad. This is a form from 1934 used to describe the neighborhood and illustrating some of the criteria that the bank would use to illustrate why it is that investment in that neighborhood should not be pursued. So it should not be a surprise to us why, given that history, these disparities exist today, and that we should be doing more than expecting folks to pick themselves up by their bootstraps. In this moment in time, more so than in many others, it's of critical importance that all of us, our state officials, our county officials, the city officials, school officials, the housing authority, pick up the mantle of civil rights and vow to be equity warriors. The practice of redlining is deplorable. Its after effects are insidious, they're pervasive, and they're persistent. If we're to undo these ugly things of our past, and we still have that work to do, we must look them squarely in the eye in the sunlight of public scrutiny and make efforts to address them. To everyone in this room who works towards that goal, I thank you for the work that you do to address these issues. I thank you for your tireless efforts to address the ugliness that this represents in our history, and I humbly thank you for allowing me to speak with you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. String. Thank you very much. Now, to continue our program, we have some good stories too. And I would like to ask Danette Carl to come up and share her homeownership experience and how the agencies that are here helped, made it possible for her to achieve the American dream of becoming a homeowner. Danette Carl, please.
Right. Somehow doing an optical illusions demo at my size easier than this, but I'll do my best. So I closed on my first house, my house, on March 1st, and I couldn't have done it with the incredible support that I had from my family, my friends, and the community groups here, the city of Schenectady. So I've always wanted to own my own house. That was one of my goals. Even when I was younger, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to own a house. I love decorating. I love sitting on a porch on Sundays, and I wanted it to be my porch. But it didn't seem like that was going to be an easy reality for me. Many of my peers, nobody was owning a house. Nobody's thinking about owning a house. It just didn't seem attainable yet. But about 2 years ago, I was moving for the third time in July. And it was so hot and unbearable, and I hated it. I was just done. I decided to really try looking into what it would take to buy my own house. So I started by reaching out to my bank, CEFQ, who got me in contact with Better Neighborhoods, and Alex Carver over here helped me out immensely. And I learned about there are amazing opportunities in every area in the capital region. So I was really focusing on Schenectady because I work at the Museum of Innovation and Science over here on Knott Terrace Heights. And I wanted to live in the community that that nonprofit served. That was very important to me. And I wanted to own a two-family house, which a lot of people in my family and friends, they were like, you want to be a first-time home buyer and a landlord? And I said, yeah, I'm going to do that. And I found out quickly how difficult it is to find one of those for you. Some of the sellers don't even want to show the house to somebody who's not an investor. So it's hard to even get into some of the properties to see them. And so I expanded my search throughout the whole capital region. I've lived here my whole life, and there was no question that I wanted to live in the capital region. But then the perfect house came up right over in Northside by Union College after months of saving with the first-time homebuyer mortgage match. And I was able to move into a flipped home, completely renovated, knew everything. My realtor was very pleased because I kept bringing him to houses that really needed a lot of rehab, and he wanted my first house to be a blessing. He kept saying, you do not want to get yourself into a rehab right off the bat. And he was really right, because there's enough to do with a completely flipped home. I've been gardening these past 2 months, starting my little seeds indoors, and I have amazing tenants. I have had just a really great support system that it worked out so well for me. I think it was some just luck, but also mainly it was the great community groups and the city of Schenectady. I worked with Ahmad, and he helped me with the second mortgage program, so that I was able to have a really great down payment. Yeah, so I thank you so much for helping me with that, and yeah, thanks.
Great story. Thank you, Danette. I would like to ask Rebecca Rivas to share her experience of becoming a homeowner in the city of Schenectady, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here today. I want to take this time to say thank you to everyone involved in this process, who gave me the opportunity to become a first-time home buyer, to myself and my family. In our paths in life, we come across many people, and we can try our best to make an impact on each other or just pass them by. I am very thankful that you were able to impact my life in such a positive way. You can be assured that we do not take for granted the blessings that you have offered. It has meant more than financial help to us, but reassured us of and built our confidence that there's still good people out there wanting to help, who care about others and want to make a difference. My grandmother immigrated from the Dominican Republic back in the 1970s. I am third generation from her descendants and the first to become a homeowner. So it's a big deal in my family. It was always very important to me to break the cycle of family poverty, which according to studies is a phenomenon where poor families become impoverished for at least 3 generations. Even though I have been able to provide my family for their living needs, it was unrealistic for me to try to save. I have 2 small children and a husband, and the cost of living is very high. And when you're trying to make it day by day, paycheck to provide for your family, it's unrealistic to try to save for a down payment for a home, as much as you try. Even with having a decent salary and a profession, that goal seemed very far to reach. Approving us for the second mortgage program goes beyond just having a house, but it opened the doors to progress. You all have given my family the opportunity to have a home, not just a place to live. For that, we're very thankful and desire that God blesses you and your family, and that you're able to take advantage and enjoy all the great things that life has to offer. I also want to encourage others to take advantage of this program. Ahmad made this process very smooth, clear, and easy, and is always available to answer any questions that you may have. It seemed very overwhelming when I first saw that list of requirements that had to be met in order to qualify. But in reality, if you take it step by step, a lot of those things are taken care of by the bank, the institution that you're using. Ahmad treated my husband and I with professionalism, respect, and always had a smile on his face. I thank you, Ahmad, for truly making your approach to the public personal and having such a humble, gentle way of making people feel comfortable. I'm pretty much used to being exposed to the public because of the type of work that I do, but my husband isn't. And he always has that prejudiced mindset in his mind that he's going to be judged based on his skin color. So it's really hard for him to be able to take advantage of certain things, make himself available to the public. And it was a blessing because you made him feel so comfortable that he was in complete shock, that he was treated with so much respect and all the integrity of the entire process. We're very thankful. This has changed our lives greatly. It's more than a home. It's what it's done to us as human beings, and it brought my faith back in people. That there are people out there truly trying to make a difference. I immigrated from the Dominican Republic when I was 4 years old. I was brought to the United States with my mom. The first person here was my grandmother, and I'm originally from New Jersey. I've only been in New York State for 6 years. Life was very difficult. I also grew up in very humble upbringings, and those people that made small impacts in my life were the ones that gave me, empowered me to continue down the path of trying to make progress. And I'm thankful for them. Sometimes we see the big picture and we think how can we help so many people? But it's not about helping a great crowd. It's about what you can do every day in your life to make a positive impact in that individual. You can make the difference into that person continuing down a positive road or turning to other things. And I'm very thankful for the people that decided to impact my life in a positive way. There's a word I'm a believer, I'm a woman of the Lord, and there's a word in the Bible that says, Proverbs 19:17, one who is gracious to the poor man lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his good deed. I'm not able to repay you materially for what you have done for me, all of you, but I know that the Lord will repay you, and you will always be in my prayers, and asking the Lord to continue giving you the strength and the motivation to continue doing good works and helping others. I'm very thankful. I also want to acknowledge that Alexandria Carver, she was the first person that I made contact with, and she made me aware of all the programs that Schenectady had to offer. And I'm so very thankful, and I hope that this continues and continues on growing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the speech were made just from the heart, not, I didn't have nothing to do with it. But it's the programs that are offered. It's the assistant from HUD. It's the assistant from the city of Schenectady. It's all of you that's working, the realtors that are showing these homes, the housing counseling agencies, the banks that are lending the money and want to be fair with everybody. It's all that makes a successful story. So thank you, Rebecca, again, appreciate it, and wish you all the best. Now we're going to go from housing to actually affirmative action. And we want to ask Ron Gardner, who started with the city of Schenectady a couple of years ago, I believe, and has some great successful programs in regards to training workers or giving opportunity to those who would not be able to find a job without the program that he runs. Mr. Gardner.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much, my friend Ahmad. Greetings, and thank you so much for seeing my congressman here, Congressman Tonko, my mayor, Mr. McCarthy, my friends from HUD, all my new friends especially. I'm so touched by her story because it resonates so much with some of us that come from the challenging background and realizing the strength of family and, the thing that you described reminds me of my grandmother and things like that. So I'm totally touched. And also by my friend, Dr. Spring over there. We run into house all together. Our kids go to the same school, so we run into him a lot. But the things that he brought up in terms of the disparity and the challenges within the community and all those things are so right on point. And we in our community, us that live, the black and brown lives, we live this every day, and it's hard to explain it on an occasion that can understand it. But to see my friend like this that really truly understand it and genuinely, I appreciate that, and I'm really touched. But to the point, we here in the city, we just launched a workforce initiative targeting economic opportunity for, for the disadvantaged or the disenfranchised, if you will, with a specific focus on Section 3. And today we, I guess the announcement was probably like a little over a week ago, but today we launched the orientation. And I had probably 20 of the most wonderful people you ever want to meet in your lives from just about every walk in life, all from the city of Schenectady. But we had young and old, people want to start a business, people in business, but they all came, looking for a dream. And we've been partnering with the SUNY Career and Counseling Center, Schenectady Community College, and many other folks in terms of launching this initiative. So we've selected 30 individuals from the community to participate in this program, and it's geared toward introducing people to the construction industry. And when you look at, on one hand, you hear there's a tremendous shortage in the industry for skilled labor. And then when I ride around, Craig Street and all the other places, and I'm looking at my brothers and sisters standing there in unemployment, 30 and 40%, I'm saying, what's the problem? Why do we have that disparity? And then you go and you talk to the firms with the opportunity, and you say, why aren't you, looking here, and you're dealing with the skill set and that, all of those questions and excuses of why it doesn't happen. So we're looking at a way of how do we bring those two factors together to make a difference and change people's lives. So we're in the business of really trying to change people's lives, and with the guidance of our mayor and our city council and support of all of my partners in the city, we're able to launch this remarkable program. So we have the students in there, telling their story. We have the instructors where we're going to train them and introduce them to the industry, but not just, whatever they want to do. More specifically, in the industry, there's opportunity if you want to be an architect, if you want to be an engineer, if you want to be an accountant, an attorney. All of those things are involved in the construction industry. So our program is designed to say, come in and just say, what did you want to do? And working with the SUNY system and the career counselors and developing all those life skills, we'll put you on the career path to get whatever the skill set that you need to make that happen. The other part of the equation is, okay, so you got these folks, we're going to train them, we're going to introduce to this, what do we do after that? What's next? So on the one hand, so we're taking small firms, so we've selected 15 local, small and emerging firms and put them into a training programs, construction management training, where we're partnering with the likes of Eastern Contractors Association, Association of General Contractors, as well as this University of Albany. And we're teaching them basically the basics of the construction industry, because typically what happens with the small guy, you got a one-man or one-woman show, they do everything. They're the carpenter, so they start 6, 7 in the morning, they work all day, and then at night they come home trying to do the book work or the paperwork or the estimate, all those things. But typically you're not going to be successful. You're not going to be able to be competitive in the environment. So what we've done is we're going to teach them how do you operate your business and show them that in order for you to be effective, you're going to need a team in your business. So you're going to need an administrator. You're going to need a back office person, because if you can't do your billing and your paperwork and all those kind of things, you're not going to get paid, and ultimately you're not going to be successful. If you can't estimate or your estimates are not correct, so you need an estimator. If you don't do that, you're not going to. And managing the job, you need a foreman or a superintendent to run a job, because you can't effectively run your business and be stuck, laying the pipe or framing or whatever. So with that in mind, we're taking these folks, so it's a 6-month program, and they'll be in there, and after that's done, they go to the next level where we're partnering them up with the majority firm, some of the big firms in the industry, in a mentor-protege relationship that will go like 2 or 3 years. So they'll work with somebody for 2 or 3 years, growing and understanding their business. So in that mindset, these folks that we're training, that we're saying, okay, there are going to be opportunities for you in this industry. By the time the workers on the right-hand side, get the skills that they need, these firms are going to be looking for that pool of labor that we're developing. So we're talking, even though the program is just starting, we're talking about being involved with somebody for a 2 or 3 year period, making a commitment, and we're in the business of changing people's lives, really, and teaching them a career in terms of how to make a difference. And then it comes full circle. So now you get back to the housing component. So now these folks that come from homeless situations or very disparate living situations, now they're in a position where they can get some of the nicer homes within the city. Ultimately, they'll be the one that's going back to purchasing some of these properties, developing some of the properties. So we're bringing this economic cycle, really full circle. So that's really what we're doing. And the real piece that I'm really making, home is we're talking about being engaged in their lives. They're going to be bumps in the road. They're going to have a hard time. They're going to have somebody to come to and talk to, when they're having a challenging situation. We're going to be there to support them and make it happen. And then the responsibility goes, throughout the community, as you talk about the banking community and all the other folks that are here. It also holds true for the city, too. As we have contracts coming up and we have goals and specific opportunities for minorities and women and contractors, we need to hold true to that and make sure that these firms come to the table, come as connected. We're going to hold you, accountable, and we expect you to give opportunities to these folks because we're going to help them, we're going to train them, and we're going to vet them. So there's not going to be any excuses. So we're in the business of changing people's lives, and that's how we do it collectively as a group. So, again, thank you so much. Again, my mayor has been so supportive, and the whole staff, the council, and that's how we're able to do it. And knowing that we got our friends in HUD and our congressman here, I think, we'll be able to get some of the resources and things to continue and really make a difference and change lives. So, thank you.
Well, in closing, I'd like to ask Mr. Andy Prishlak to come up because he has helped me organize this and behind the scene. And I didn't want to write his name on the closing remarks because everywhere I wrote his name, I misspelled it. Again, his last name. So I was safe this time that I wrote my name. Mr. Prishlak, if you want to close this up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yusufi. He's telling the truth. I have both my name tag and my tag for this misspelled 2 different ways. So that's a first. It's happened before, but I really appreciate all the time and effort for putting together a fabulous program. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for putting, again, all your efforts in furthering fair housing as we bring the whole community together. To you, to your commissioners, to your staff, we offer them a round of applause. Madam Assistant Secretary, Congressman Tonko, and to all the speakers that were here in front of us today, thank you for your awe-inspiring words and your thought-provoking ideas. 50 years ago, one of the greatest tragedies occurred in our country. However, born out of that was perhaps one of the most important pieces of legislation, the Federal Fair Housing Act. Let's rededicate ourselves today to make sure that the next step into the 50th year, into the 51st year and beyond, is one where we can offer hope and opportunity for every single person that is our neighbor, that is our friend, that is our constituent, that is part of our fabric, of our community. To all of you who help whose work goes unnoticed so many times, who work tirelessly to help the homeless person, to get the veteran back on their feet, to rebuild communities, to offer housing, to finance the housing, all of you, without a doubt, deserve a huge round of applause. So please give yourself a round of applause. Thank you again for making this a truly wonderful afternoon, and I turn it back to Mr. Yusufi.
Again, Congressman, Madam Assistant Secretary, Mayor, Mr. Golden, and Mr. Brzezinski, thank you for coming from all the way there and having a lunch with us. Greatly appreciated, and have a great afternoon. Happy spring. We had the first spring weather yesterday today.